السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. في لقاء يتجدد مع بنت النور، يسعدني من هنا من غانا أن أستضيف كاتبة مميزة، وهي إحدى الانستراكتور أو المعلمين في هذه الدورة التدريبية التي التقيت بها التي نأخذها هنا في غانا. أستاذتي اليوم هي أستاذة هاوا جاندي غولاكاي، وهي كاتبة ليبيرية وباحثة طبية وكاتبة مقالات معروفة برواياتها البوليسية المثيرة. أستاذتي ولدت في جولاكاي في عام 79 في ليبيريا. عاشت تجارب الحرب الأهلية الليبيرية تأثر بشكل كبير على كتاباتها فيما بعد. أستاذتي أيضا لها رواية بعنوان تأثير لازاروس من عام 2011، وهي رواية جريمة مشوقة تستحسان النقاد جميعهم. وهي أيضا صحفية تعمل في مجال الصحافة وتكتب موضوعات كثيرة، غالبا ما يتعلق بعنوان الصدمات النفسية والبقاء على قيد الحياة وتعقيدات الحياة الحضرية في إفريقيا، حيث تستطيع أن تكتب وتمزج بين الغموض واستكشاف عميق للطبيعة البشرية. بالإضافة إلى رواياتها كتبت مقالات أخرى وأعمالا غير خيالية. تعد الأستاذة جاندي أيضا صوتا فريدا في الأدب الإفريقي المعاصر، حيث تجمع بين خبرتها ككاتبة وعالمة لتقدم لقرائها أعمالا خارج أنحاء القارة الإفريقية. First thing I want to welcome you on my show. I'm really honored to be with you here, and it's my pleasure, really. So first thing I want to ask you about your first beginning or like childhood. Why you choose to be a writer? What things inspired you or influenced you to be a writer after you grow up?
I had a very adventurous childhood, a very adventurous life. I was raised in Liberia for the first decade of my life, and then there was a civil war. And then after the civil war, my family and we escaped, and we were refugees, and we went wherever my parents could find work. So as a result of that life, we moved to several countries. We went to Ivory Coast, and then we went to Togo, then to Ghana, South Africa, Botswana. We went several places,
journey, yeah.
very long, which was very unstable for a child.
Yes.
And I was very inside my imagination. I had a lot of friends in my imagination. I would cook up worlds. And even when I was in Liberia, when I had a stable life, I enjoyed making up stories. I would write comics, and that prompted me after the war to keep writing, even though there were times when I dropped my writing because things were so hard, and I had to focus on my studies, being in biology and then going to medical immunology in medical school and then working. I didn't write for a long period of time. I left all my artistic side behind, but then later on I was very frustrated in my job at the hospital, and so I picked up writing again, and then I just kept writing and kept going.
Wow, that's interesting. But how? It's a big difference between your specialist to study and working and you back to writing. There's a very huge between them.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think that they are different, but arts and science are very interwoven. They are very similar. The way you break things apart in science and the way you break things apart and build them up in art, there's a craft, there's a construction, it's the same thing. So people think that art and science and medicine are very different, but the craft of the artist and the craft of a scientist and a medical person, they are very the same. And one thing I got frustrated in was when I was in the medical field, how people would write and the writing was very boring. They don't tell it like a story. They tell it as facts.
Yes.
So when I started writing again, that was very beautiful and refreshing to me to recapture how beautiful the world of writing is. And you can make up anything and put it in that world, and it's true. So that's what I enjoyed.
Miss Jandi, what are the sources of inspiration for your writing?
I have multiple sources of, I don't think there's one source of inspiration for any author. I enjoy cooking, I enjoy gardening, I enjoy science and reading up on research. I enjoy being creative.
Yes.
So the source of creativity can be anything. When I garden,
Yes,
when
of
I play with my son, all those things are forms of storytelling. So
Yes.
it's when I interact with my family, when we celebrate, when we fight, all those things help me to create more stories. So it's never one thing. Life itself
Yes.
is a source of inspiration.
Let me ask you about the book, the famous book. We heard about it. In the effect of Lazarus.
The Lazarus effect, yes.
Yeah, Lazarus effect. Tell us about how you arrived at it, from which argue, what is inspired you to write this book, and about our characters. What's happening inside it?
The Lazarus effect was a story that like I said, I was very frustrated in my job. I wanted to leave the medical and science field, but it was a question of I had spent so many years studying to be a scientist, going to school.
Yeah.
You know,
That's
you can't just
yeah.
and I was a scholarship student. So after completing my master's, it's like working 2 years, 3 years. I was like, you can't just leave it. You can't just quit.
Yes, yes.
We don't come from families where you just decide,
Yeah.
I want to do something else. I want to be an artist.
We don't have this luxury.
Yeah.
To do,
So I was like, I wanted to find a new profession. But in the meantime, I was like, I always love to write. So let me pick up my writing again.
Yes.
And for the past year, the story
that made you very brave to do that step.
Yes, I didn't feel that way at the time. I just felt very desperate. But looking back on it, I just took a risk and said, I will finish this book and then we will see what happens. So the story was of a woman just like me who was seeing the ghost of a young girl. And the ghost of the young girl was a child who had gone missing some years before, and only her mother was looking for her. So people did not know that this girl had died. So she was appearing to this journalist, and the journalist has the ability to sometimes see dead people. So she went and found located the mother of this girl, and so she started the case that had never been solved of what had happened to this young girl. So it was a story of Lazarus, the story of resurrection, which was mirrored to my life, which was what the book did for me. It brought me back from the dead.
Really,
it
you
brought
are
me
brave
back
to talk
my...
about yourself, even through your experience.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. We can do that. Please, I want to ask another questions about how do you see the role of literatures in achieving social change in Africa?
Well, Africa is a very inventive place. The way people live, the way Africa is a place of such creativity and such value and such. There's so much wealth here, but it's not the people who need it don't have it. So when artists in the story of the struggling artists, people fighting for their survival here and living off of their art, those are very, very brave stories. I mean, you call me brave, but I always had a career to fall back on. But there are people who live solely off their art. They are sculptors, they are painters, they are writers, and it's amazing that they are able to do this. And our governments are not always places where we can find help, where we can find funding, where we can find people who will promote us and help us with investment, with the tools that we need, with workshops such as the one that we are at. So it's really a catch-22 of something where you have so much and you could do more with it, but the people who need it don't have the access to it. So really, art itself is always, it's a sign for change. It can be a weapon for change. It should be a push for change, but it should be promoted more in our African governments. And it should be interconnected, because our countries, you work and it's so isolated. Outside of your country, people won't know the work that you are doing. We don't connect with each other. So I've now written 2 books and so many essays. But outside of the writing circle of Africa, I want to do more. I want to be more known because we create these platforms for us to reach out to other artists internationally as well, and we support each other. So we have to build those platforms where we can do always
we're
more.
doing great. It's just like a slowly step,
It's
but
slowly,
I think
yeah.
it's moving.
We are. It's
Yeah.
moving.
Yeah.
It's moving, and we wanted to. We wanted to
Yeah,
pick
we
up.
want that. Yeah, we want
wanted to
faster
pick
to
up.
move. Yeah.
I want to see so much in my lifetime,
Really, really, yeah.
especially for kids and our children coming up. We want to be the generation where we really see things that physical and dogmatic changes that we made, where we can say we started that, or we built, we had the platforms and we built it and did more and did better things with it.
Yeah, we hope so. I have to ask you about your prize you are winning, about your writing. You can tell me about that experience?
Okay. The first prizes were for my crime fiction book. For the crime fiction books, the Lazarus Effect mainly, it was shortlisted for 3 or 4 prizes.
Wow.
And one of the biggest ones was the Wole Soyinka Prize, African Prize for writing. So that was a big one. And it was also shortlisted in South Africa for the book prize. The book prize every year that is for fiction.
Yes.
So those 3 prizes really pushed me to, it really promoted my platform. It really brought me in. The people were like, oh, this is someone to know. Yeah, And then the Africa 39 prize was awarded to the most promising writers in Africa at that time. It was a UNESCO and WHO award, and I was the only Liberian writer awarded on the list. So it was very proud. It was, it was a big deal for me. I came to Nigeria for the first time. It was a little sad because it happened during the Ebola outbreak, when there was Ebola in my country and so many people died. So during the prize, when it was awarded and we were being celebrated, so many people in my country lost their lives from Ebola. And I kept on writing, and I won a short story award for my experience during Ebola, because I was away from the country.
Yes.
But I was here in the beginning, and then I left, and I was almost re-experiencing what it was like to be a refugee, because I stayed with so many people because I couldn't go home. There were no more flights to my country anymore because of the outbreak. And then when I came home, the outbreak continued for 2 or 3 more years, where people were still patches of outbreaks. So I wrote an essay about this experience of what it's like to leave your country as a refugee. You come back, you think it's safe, and then 20 years later, you are experiencing the same thing. When you leave, there's a new threat.
Like the same
before there was guns,
again,
and then now there's a disease.
Yes.
So I won for that essay. I won 2 awards for that essay, and then there was some speculative fiction, science fiction, where I was nominated for my short stories. So it's really been good. There've been a lot of things that have really showcased my writing and really put me at the forefront, especially to represent Liberia, because there are not a lot of Liberian writers also, as well as writing things like fantasy and science fiction. Yes.
Well, I'm proud of you. Yeah, you did something great. Please, I know you are my teachers. And all the hard one who give us assignment one by I don't even have a time. But really, you have some style or technique you are used to do with the student to learning us in this kind of workshop writing?
This is when I usually teach writing. It's usually to people like you're very advanced. So this Connects workshop has been so impressive for teaching very advanced students who really, they shouldn't worry about their style and what to do and all those things. I know you're worried, but you have a lot of technique already, because usually as I teach my country, it doesn't have a lot of writers.
Mm-hmm.
We are very few Liberian writers and very few who are like on the world stage like me, where people know you, they know your profile,
Yes.
where you've done enough body of work for people to know who you are,
Yes.
and to invite you to things like Canex to help other emerging writers. So what I will say is one of the key techniques of writing is to trust your work. You have to trust your work. You have to trust that your work is good enough, that you've edited enough, that you have a good circle of people that you can trust to say to help you
Yes.
to put your work in good condition. And that is a very key thing. You have to trust yourself, because I took a risk and I didn't know which way the
Yes, you
risk
took a risk.
would go. But a lot of writers are afraid. They don't want to
Yes,
talk
but
to the
still, yeah,
editors.
it is the same
But you have to
cycle, yeah.
be a bit more fearless, because that's what creating art is about. Don't think about, oh, the audience will say this and what you don't have to, like, oh, my mother will read this and she will think, you know, you write and you hold the best part of what you want to say,
Yes.
you put it on the page. So that's the best advice, to be, you will never be completely fearless, because you have to be fearless but also
and
humble.
adapted, yeah,
You have to play between those two things. But you have to trust yourself. You have to really learn to trust yourself, and that is where you will know how to network with people, how you will know how to show people your work,
Yes.
how you will connect with publishers, how you will make friends that you will stay with and carry with you to help you throughout your craft. So, like, that's advice that I always say. It's more life advice than writing advice, but
Yes.
life is just like writing. Everything you do in your art, it's just like your craft.
Yes, yes, yeah. Let me ask you about your publishing book and or the process through publishing from starting until finishing your book, and the like type of agency, because this we didn't know about in Arabic word, not have too much. Even me and Masma, we are just discussing about this today in morning. She told me, don't have, like, I have agent. I say no, but when you are talking about us, we think maybe something common. So I think if you can tell us about more process of the publishing and about your experience in publishing book.
Okay, the experience of the publishing world is largely because the process was of monetizing book publishing, having a printing press, running through the whole thing. It started in the Western world of putting things out there and doing it as a periodical or serialized, and you pay authors a small amount of money for their
Yes.
work. So it was largely started abroad, and the concept of the publishing industry is still a very largely Western that we all follow. So I don't have an agent, even though I've been asked by agents to be represented. So now having an agent is something that I would seriously considering. But I started out, I didn't have an agent, because when you start out in Africa, we don't have agents here. For
No.
most of Africa, we don't really have a platform where a lot of people run literary agencies
Yeah.
and represent authors. Sometimes it's film and music, but for writing, we don't have a
Yes.
lot of agents
Really,
here.
yes.
So I always advise people that as your writing progresses, you get more work, you get more business. It's good to have an agent to handle that side, because it leaves you to do the actual work.
Yes.
I've faced so much. I've learned so many hard lessons
Yeah, the
in my publishing in my publishing journey. And if I can, hand that lessons down to other writers, to tell them this is how you go. These are the things that you do, that you don't do. I will save them a lot of the problems and the heartache that comes with, because writing is a problem by itself. It's hard enough. Then you worrying about the publishing
Yes.
side. But the advice that I can give is always to, in everything you do, you approach people with you have a good heart. When you approach publishers, you be polite, you approach them well, you write very clear letters, you tell them who you are. And when people want to publish your book, they will see who you are through not just your
Yes.
writing itself, but how you present yourself. Because you can be a very good writer, but if people get tired of working with you, you have a bad reputation, that just taints everything. So in everything you do, maybe be a good person. It's very general, but I think that's the best approach to do anything, because then people will recommend you for anything you want to do. People will always remember you and that you were good to work with, and then your reputation can only go upwards.
Now you give me like a little hope. Like there's one movie in the past, it's like Shortcut Happiness. But now maybe like shortcut writing. Discover this in chemistry workshop. في الأخير أصدقائي، لي سعد سنة أشكر أستاذتي جاندي على هذا اللقاء الممتع الثري بالمعلومات وخبرتها الحياتية، وأتمنى لها المزيد من التوفيق. I think we reached the final our meeting, and really thank you so much for your lovely smiling, for your talking, for everything. Your informative information given to us. Thank you so much. It's my honor to be here.
You are very welcome, Salma. Thank you for the interview.
Thank you so much. Thank you. أصدقائي أترككم في أمان الله. إلى اللقاء.